So 30 men's fragrances going all the way back in time and up to the late 90s, ranked as how great they smell. So I'm ranking this video in a way that number 1 is going to be the best smelling fragrance out of these classic men's fragrances, and number 30 is going to be least great smelling. They're all great fragrances, but they were once amazing fragrances, and throughout the years they're still selling. All of these are selling, and their reformulations have left these fragrances smelling not so great. Does that make sense to you guys? So what I wanted to do was rank them in a way that how great they smell. So 30 men's fragrances, classic men's fragrances, dating all the way till the end of the 90s. And there's some stuff that's really like older here, like one of the fragrances goes to the 30s, launched in the 30s. So if you're curious to learn about these fragrances and how great they smell and how not great they smell, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. Yes, I'm talking about classic men's fragrances. 30 of them. I'm going to do this video as fast as possible. But, you know, I was buying a lot of classic fragrances throughout the lockdown. And I bought some that smelled okay. Some smelled great still. Some you can tell that they're kind of like with the reformulations, they're not smelling great. And that's why I thought, you know what, there are classic fragrances here that I really enjoy and have enjoyed a lot back in the day, and I should let you guys know about them and how great they smell or not great they smell, since you guys might be up to buying some of these. So I'm going to tell you all these fragrances, 30 total fragrances, all targeted to men. But before I get to the fragrances, if this is your first time tuning into my channel and you still haven't subscribed, but please do subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below, and also click the bell so you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. I'll start off with the first one. It's from the house of Ralph Lauren, and it's POLO, the green bottle, this one right here. So recently I was at a outlet store near my mom, and there is a L'Oreal owned brands outlet store there that sell discounted fragrances. I find great deals there all the time. I smelled this in passing. I thought, oh my god, that brings back great memories. My dad wore this one. So I'm going to go ahead and order a bottle. I ordered it online. I didn't have a chance to buy it there. And I got it. You know, initial smell is amazing, but the dry down sucks big time. It's a pine tree leather combo fragrance, but it has notes of Oakmoss, tobacco, patchouli, chamomile in it. Initial blast is amazing. It reminds me and takes me back to the days when I was stealing sprays, or actually splashes, from my dad's bottles in the late 70s, early 80s. But it dries down to a very, very bad leather fragrance. So it's been kind of like damaged currently in its current formulation, which is sad because it's a great fragrance, very, very nostalgic, means a lot to me, and I love that green bottle, as you can see right there. That's a great bottle. Love the color. Also, I've decanted some of this juice, as you can see, to send to a friend, and the juice inside is green itself. I didn't realize that. Never in a million years knew that it was green, but it's green juice. Anyway, POLO is number 30. So the next one is kind of similar. It has a similar bad leather note in here, but I love the whole nostalgia around this fragrance, and this has a lot of meaning for me. The next two fragrances, well, the POLO as well. This is ANTAEUS from the house of Chanel, and it's a leather fragrance. To me, there's a very it smells kind of like it's broken apart. The leather in here, which usually they use Castoreum to create this leather note, I feel like since they've reformulated because of IFRA regulations, because you can't really use Castoreum, or can you? I don't think you can anymore. The leather recreation that they created in here smells a little off. It doesn't smell like as great as it once did. So I feel like it's deserving to be at 29. I love having the fragrance, and once in a while I pull for it and wear it, but as far as the quality of the rest of the fragrances, this is at the bottom because of how it doesn't smell as good as it once did. So that's 29, Chanel ANTAEUS. This next one is another fragrance that's kind of similar. In fact, both of these fragrances, ANTAEUS and the number 28, KOUROS, have a lot of meaning for me, because I was like 11, 10 years old when I first discovered these fragrances, and they meant a lot to me because of the advertising campaigns were both very, very sexy, and the fragrances themselves were very, very sexy, amazing fragrances. But unfortunately, this smells just a little better than ANTAEUS to me, because this leather here, the leather seems to be not as good as some of the notes in this one, but this one's known for Civet, and I'm assuming L'Oreal, who is the distributor of YSL's KOUROS, has a synthetic Civet in there, perhaps Civetone. But there's honey, there's aldehydes, there is leather, musk, oakmoss, patchouli, coriander, but the leather in this one is not so stand out, so I can tolerate this one a little more than this one. But in the end, it's not what it used to be, sadly, but you know, these both are very, very iconic fragrances from the early 80s, powerhouse men's fragrances that if you're at all into learning about these fragrances and you have the budget to, you know, buy bottles and test them out, or you know, find them at you know, sometimes at the used stores, places where they sell like vintage things and things like that, do buy them, because I think if you're willing to learn about them, they're great ways to learn. And who knows, sometimes you might run into a vintage bottle that was, you know, launched or released multi years ago, and you might end up with something great if they've kept it in great condition. Does that make sense to you guys? All right, another fragrance my dad wore that means a lot to me, and having this fragrance, but it has seen its days. It doesn't smell as great as it once did, but still I feel like it smells a little better than the previous three. And you can still find this at Macy's. Macy's sells this fragrance, if not in the store, definitely online. It's ARAMIS. Once again, we have a leather fragrance here, but you know, everything around this fragrance smells so good that the leather, if you can separate it from all the other notes, will remind you about with the leather of the other three fragrances. But still, I think this one's definitely much more tolerable than the others. But this is a very, very spicy, woody, aromatic leather fragrance. Leather, patchouli, oakmoss, musk, sandalwood, sage, aldehydes. It's classy, it's masculine, it's a bit rugged, but really, really very, very, you know, like a historic fragrance for men to check into. This is from the 60s. I believe it's the late 60s when this came out, and it's been around since then. And still, like I said, I see it on Macy's website, so there's probably a following for this one. I rarely see something like this. Or maybe they are there, but still I feel like very, very iconic fragrances. The ARAMIS brand is very, very iconic with masculine fragrances. And there's going to be, I think, one more from ARAMIS here on this list. So the next fragrance we're going to is this one right here, HALSTON Z14. So this is a fragrance that my dad and my uncle both wore, and I was obsessed with. It was, once again, not a spray bottle, it was a splash bottle, but I was always like, you know, pouring it in my hands and wearing it all over my face and hands or arms or whatever. But what I liked about this one is the cinnamon with the cypress note. Of course, once again, we have leather. Every single one of these fragrances features leather. I think leather was a very, very popular note back in the day, and it's definitely here. But here, I feel like the cinnamon and cypress are so strong that it kind of tones down the bad parts about this leather that is now in here in comparison to the leather that used to be in here, because that's a problem I'm having with these fragrances, of these classic fragrances. The leather doesn't smell as good as it once did. But what a great fragrance this once was. Several years ago, when I was first getting into this hobby of reviewing fragrances dating back to 2011, 2012, there was a fragrance from Tom Ford called Italian Cypress, which reminded me of this, a much better version of this current formulation at that time, not the original formulation, if that makes sense. And I love that fragrance. It was so good, really, really great fragrance. But I feel like it wasn't really the style of fragrances that people really gravitate towards these days, so that's why that one was discontinued. But if you are missing that fragrance, you can definitely check this one out, because the notes are very, very similar. Cypress, of course, is in here, and Italian Cypress was about Cypress. So that's Z14 from the house of HALSTON, a rarely spoken about brand anymore. This next one's going to the house of DIOR. This is JULES, this one right here. Recently I saw this at DIOR USA's website, so finally it's getting a release release here, probably only online. So I've never seen it in stores, but I was seeing this in stores in France and the UK, and I think in Italy as well when they first launched this about 4 or 5 years ago. And this one is a redo of the original fragrance from the early 80s. It's all about galbanum, fir, leather again, cyclamen, herbal notes, Hedione, black pepper, and cedar. It's a musky, animalic, slightly bitter green fragrance. It totally reminds me of the others, and once again the leather in here does not smell as good as it once did. It was a very, very classy, sexy fragrance, Jules. The bottle is different as well, but this is the current formulation. If this is all you can get and you like this kind of a fragrance, you should definitely check it out. As I said, I just recently saw it on the DIOR website, the USA DIOR website, not the France or UK DIOR website. So it is available here now, and so if you like the idea of this fragrance, you should definitely go check it out. So this is Jules, a great classy fragrance for men, very, very early 80s, late 70s style though, so young noses might not be into this, so check that out. It's Jules from DIOR. Okay, this one I did a full review of on the channel. This is a classic that I wore and my dad wore, and I love this one. This is AZZARO Pour Homme. So if you don't know this one, it's a aromatic fougere fragrance. It's something that I was really attracted to, the fougere fragrances. And there's another one that I wore plenty of that I'm going to get to. But this one I like for its anise note. So it's a kind of a licoricey, slightly boozy spice note of anise that distinguishes this particular aromatic fougere from other ones. And I like that about this one. So it's anise, oakmoss, leather, vetiver, lavender, sandalwood, and patchouli. And here, since the leather is not so prominent, you don't pick out that kind of bad leather smell like you do in the other ones where the leather is much more prominent. It's more up front. So in the end, it's a little better to appreciate something like this. That's why it's not to the end, so close to the end. It is close to the end because a lot of the fragrances here are going to start getting or smelling better, but it's not like the last one, like POLO was. And I love the whole booziness that this anise note adds, and then the unique twist to the fragrance that the anise note has. I love the anise note in fragrances, and I always seek them out, and here it does a great change for an aromatic fougere. So that is AZZARO Pour Homme from the House of AZZARO, and I don't know what L'Oreal is going to do with the House of AZZARO. Are they going to butcher up the fragrances? I know that is very, very classic. I know that L'Oreal is killing or discontinuing a lot of older YSL fragrances, so I don't know if that's going to be with us for a lot longer. So if you are a fan of it, get yourself a backup bottle. This next fragrance, going to the House of PACO RABANNE, it's Pour Homme. So interesting, I bought this one during the lockdown. I was kind of like on a kick to, you know, get every single classic men's fragrance that I didn't have in my collection, and I did not realize that this is a decantable bottle. It is, but the cap was different on here. So what I like about this one, and once again it's a green fragrance, but thankfully the smell, even though it smells a little dated, for sure I could say that, there's not like this leather note in the previous fragrances that kind of ruins this smell. Does that make sense? So it's kept intact and it smells pretty darn good for me, and I love that about this one. So in the end, oakmoss, lavender, rosemary, clary, sage, rosewood, and honey. It's a pretty darn good fragrance for what you get. It's very, very classic. It's a fougere. Once again, it's an aromatic fougere, and you can totally experience it because anytime you see lavender and oakmoss together, missing the tonka beans because usually that's a note that's also in the base notes, but definitely it has that aromatic fougere vibe that's really, really pleasant. So that one, I feel like you can still get away with it, but again, it smells a little dated. But if you like the idea of these classic men's fragrances, definitely check out PACO RABANNE Pour Homme. So next, going to the House of Geoffrey BEENE, it's Grey Flannel. So this is an amazing fragrance. Once again, my dad wore this one, but I was always pulling sprays from. And you know, there's a lot of hate for this one. I think it's just because it's a very bitter fragrance. It focuses on violet leaves, so it's an ozonic, slightly watery fragrance, but there's lots of bitter green woodsy notes and bitter kind of like resinous notes. The galbanum that's in here is very, very bitter. It's a bitter fragrance, and it's also very, very green. So that is in here, and it smells so good. I don't care what people say about this fragrance. It smells really, really great. And I know a lot of these fragrances that I'm talking about today have been watered down. They're not the potency that they once was. Even this, the potency is not there, but as a fragrance, as a smell, there's no leather in here. So I feel like the smell is pretty close to what I used to remember smelling back in the day. So there hasn't been a lot of changes with the actual notes in here, because they're not using a lot of notes that are regulated. Although there is oak moss in here, so for sure they probably have changed that up, but I feel like the smell itself has been kept intact to what it once was, or very, very close to it. But this is an awesome scent. Every time I smell it, it just brings tears to my eyes almost, because it's such a great smell. The smell takes me back to the early not the early 70s, the early 80s, when I remember wearing this from my dad. So it's violet, galbanum, oakmoss, vetiver, petitgrain, neroli, iris. So it's a bitter green fragrance, very ozonic with a violet leaves note. So that's gray flannel from the house of Geoffrey Beene. I don't even know that, I don't think Geoffrey Beene does any fragrances anymore. So thankfully that fragrance is left for us. So at number 21, we're going to the house of Armani, and this is Acqua di Gio, a classic fragrance that I first wore in 1997. It was gifted to me by my younger brother and sister as a birthday present. And you know, this has gone through a lot of changes. It's not what it used to be. In fact, I find the current Profumo version more along the line of what the original version smelled like to me. It just had a lot more depth and punch to your face, even though it was an aquatic with melony notes like melons. Here it's very, very watered down, very, like it's just been watered down. And I feel like it smells similar to it, but it's just like it's a faint version of the original, which is fine, but I love the original. It was so good, and it was so long lasting. It was long lasting. This doesn't last as long, hardly at all. So the deal I like about this, it's a marine fragrance, and it was before I got kind of sick of marine notes, and there was a kind of marine fragrances that I enjoyed wearing, like Armani Acqua di Gio. So this is sea notes, lime, jasmine, cologne, peach, freesia, bergamot, white musk. The only thing that's missing here is I get a melon, kind of like a cantaloupes or like a yellow or orange melons of some kind, which is not listed, which is I think how they were able to get this like aquatic marine smell in the fragrance. It's still fine, you know, but I much prefer the Profumo than this, and I feel like what these conglomerates and the brands themselves have done is to, I don't know, this is just the thinking I have, water down the original so they will launch multiple flankers of a parfum, an eau de parfum, this is an eau de toilette, you know, this flanker and that flanker for us, but that could totally be not true. But I feel like that's what's happened. You know, why have all these eau de toilettes that used to be so strong back in the day, like intense, like very, very long lasting than what you get as an eau de parfum today? Why have they gotten so weak? So could they so that they can launch us these multiple versions of fragrances if the fragrance itself is doing well as a seller? I don't know how true that is, but that's how I'm picturing that's going on. Not true probably, but what do you think about this idea? Either way though, this is I think I like this fragrance. It's just here because it's so weak. Otherwise, if it was back in the way it was back in the 97, 98 when I wore it, I think it would have been a great fragrance if it was still in that same concentration and performance. Anyway, Acqua di Gio from the house of Armani. So this fragrance I think has some challenging times. So I'm putting it here because it's pretty amazing for me, but I think some of you that are not used to fragrances like this might be turned off by it because it does go a little musky, animalic. This is Givenchy's original Gentleman with major notes of patchouli, civet, honey, and leather. So again, once again, the leather in here doesn't smell as bad as the leathers that we were discussing a little while ago, because I think the honey kind of tones down everything. The patchouli adds this really beautiful earthiness, woody earthiness to the fragrance. And then there's oak moss, vetiver, musk, cinnamon, and rose. What a wonderful fragrance this is. Still smells great today. For me it does, but I think for the masses it might not. So that's why I'm ranking it a little lower. Plus, you know, some of the other fragrances that are coming up are definitely a little better than this. But obviously, this fragrance beat out something like ANTAEUS or KOUROS, because those are a little more challenging than this one. For me, at least for me it is. So this is Givenchy Gentleman. For sure, it's a great fragrance. You should definitely try. It's at number 20. Now this next fragrance is another one that I wore plenty of. I wore 4 total bottles of this one. Very, very historic fragrance for me. I was obsessed with the way it smells, and I was obsessed with the way the bottle looked. Amazing bottle. Black bottle, Drakkar Noir at number 19. This is another aromatic fougere. The very first time I wore this was 1984, all the way to 1988 to 1989. I wore 4 or 5 bottles. I did notice a change in smell once one of the bottles, the very last bottle, so that I could tell there was a reformulation, or maybe it was a bad bottle. But what I like about this one is the whole aromatic stuff. It's Oakmoss, it's leather. Leather is in here, but the leather smells pretty darn good in this one. It doesn't smell bad, or as bad as the other notes. There's lavender, there's fir, there's pine, there's juniper, sandalwood, vetiver, and lemon. And notice a lot of these notes they don't use much of anymore in men's fragrances. I think people's tastes have changed, but pine and fir and you know, lavender is still pretty common, but those notes don't come up much anymore in men's fragrances. But I loved it in here, and this stuff lasted and lasted and lasted and lasted and lasted. It was so strong. It's an eau de toilette. It's much weaker than it is, or it used to be now, but I feel like the scent is pretty intact. Not 100%, but pretty intact. Just the potency is not there. Anyway, Drakkar Noir, number 19. What a great fragrance it was. Many, many high school memories of that one. Many. It's just, I wore it throughout all late junior high and high school, throughout my high school years. Now going to the House of Chanel once again, and this is at number 18. It's Platinum Egoiste. I've got this one here because I've gotten kind of bored of it, and it's a very, very metallic fragrance. This is ultra metallic for me, and the combination of the notes makes it go very, very metallic. It's lavender, geranium, oak moss, vetiver, rosemary, neroli, clary, sage, and galbanum. So it is a bitter, metallic experience, but it's aromatic and it's fresh and refreshing. Just the platinum name gives it that whole metallic vibe to begin with, but the combination of some of the notes like lavender, geranium does make it go metallic. I feel like this is kind of like the precursor of something like AZZARO Chrome. I think they're both kind of very metallic kind of fragrances, and they came about 3 years apart from one another. But I've got it at number 18. Even though it smells pretty darn good, it's a lot weaker than it used to be. And just as a rating system, I put it here because I feel like it's not as good as some of the other fragrances. But I know this one has fans, and I have a video on the channel comparing Platinum Egoiste to the original Egoiste with Dahlia. If you haven't caught that video, go catch that. So this is number 18. Platinum Egoiste. Now this fragrance I haven't spoken much about on the channel here, but at once I did on the old channel. This is from a house called Alfred Sung. It's Sung Homme. This is a house, an Asian guy from I think Canada, a design house, and I don't think he designs anymore. I'm not 100% sure because I don't see new fragrances released from this house. But this is like Irish Spring soap intensified in a bottle. It smells so good still. It smells a little dated, obviously. Some people might not be into these kind of fragrances because once again we got the fir, pine tree, those kind of notes in here, but there are you know, aldehydes in here, bergamot, oak moss, carnation, juniper berries, a little bit of lavender as well. So it's one great potent concoction. And you know, they don't have a lot of reformulations of this one, so it still smells pretty darn close to the original fragrance, and it lasts as long as well. So if you don't know Sung Homme, check it out. I feel like the juice color is awesome, as you can see, and the performance is awesome of this one. It still smells great. It just takes me back to when I first wore this, like the very, very late 80s, early 90s. So that's Sung Homme from the house of Alfred Sung. And this next one, it's here sadly. I feel like it's gone through a lot of changes from the mid-90s. This came out in the mid-90s. This is La Malle from the house of Jean-Paul Gaultier. This one's all about vanilla, lavender, mint, cinnamon. There's tonka beans, amber, sandalwood, orange blossom, and coriander. So it is a powdery fragrance. It's lavendery. It's also vanillic. It was extremely strong, intense fragrance. And I know this is a very, very iconic fragrance created by Francis Kurkdjian. I feel like currently it doesn't smell as good as it once did. Obviously, it's been reformulated and it's the best version they can give us currently, but you know, it's a very, very nostalgic fragrance. That bottle is very, very iconic, as you can see, and they've got so many flankers of this fragrance. But if you like the idea of vanilla and lavender together with mint and powdery, this is definitely one for you to try. So that is Jean-Paul Gaultier La Malle, a very, very iconic fragrance, and probably one of the very first fragrances by Francis Kurkdjian. He created that fragrance. All right, this is a very, very important fragrance for me. It was one of the fragrances that I had anticipated after really being obsessed with the sillage of a very feminine fragrance that women were wearing called Angel. When they launched this fragrance in 1996, I ran and bought a bottle. This is Muglaire's Amen. It used to be called Angel Men, and now they've obviously called it Amen, and it's been around since 1996. It is a gourmand fragrance with lots of notes of coffee, caramel, patchouli, lavender, vanilla, tonka beans, honey, mint. All of it really, really intensely beastly. Very, very long-lasting eau de toilette from the house of Mugler, one of my favorite designer houses. Obviously, the notes that I read, some of them they've turned into actual fragrances themselves, like pure coffee, pure tonka, things like that. But it was the men's version of Angel, a lot more intense, a little more beefier, a lot more masculine, very, very punchy, but a gourmand after all. It's a very, very intense masculine gourmand for sure. But currently it has been watered down a bit. Well, not a bit, quite a bit. It doesn't have its intensity and roughness as it once did, and unfortunately, that's sad about this one. But that's the only thing we can get right now. It's 20 plus years old, and unfortunately, that's the best we can have with this fragrance. But at one time, this was one of the most amazing fragrances for me, and I loved wearing it. Anyway, that's Muglaire's Amen from 1996. A great fragrance. If you haven't tried it, please do. All right, this next one is from the house of Davidoff, and this is Zino Davidoff right here. It's a great, great scent. A lot of you had mentioned for me to get this one, and it had been such a long time since I had put my nose on it or even wear it, but I'm glad I did. It's really inexpensive for a 4.2 ounce bottle. Does that work out to be 120 ml? It was about 20 bucks for this. Amazing. And it smells so good today, like amazingly good. It's patchouli, sandalwood, vanilla, lavender, rosewood, clary sage, and also rose and sage. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of this one right here. And I'll get to this fragrance in a little bit. This is Heritage from the house of Guerlain. But this in itself, it's very, very beastly, but a lot more intensely patchouli. Slightly animalic muskiness under there as well. And I feel like that's not being credited, but it's definitely sexy. I love this one, but still, I feel like there's something in here that's gone a little bad, a little bit. But overall, it's pretty amazing. This is Zino Davidoff at number 14. If you don't know that, check it out. This next fragrance is from the house of Aramis. This is Havana. It's one of the fragrances I wore in the early to mid 90s. No, I think it was the mid 90s for this one. Probably around 95 or 96. It was in a beautiful frosted blue bottle, blue as in the color here. And it was a great, great tobacco, obviously named Havana. It's focusing on tobacco, cinnamon, patchouli, oak moss, fir, carnation, mandarin orange, and basil. It's very aromatic, it's spicy, and the tobacco in here doesn't really smell too much like burned or ashy tobacco. I feel like it's more the tobacco leaves and pre-burning, but it's a great scent. It's very, very wonderful. I think Aramis has kept this pretty darn close to its original form. It's not identical, obviously. It is a little weaker than it once was, but still a great smelling, spicy tobacco fragrance from the house of Aramis. So that's Aramis Havana. All right, going to the house of Animal Animal, and this is Animal Animal. Who is a fan of this fragrance? I have a little video on this channel with a man that used to be part of the brand that I shot several years ago. If you're curious to learn about the history of Animal Animal and how they were influenced by Angel by Mugler, you should go catch that. So this came before Muglaire's Amen, and I think it was kind of like I don't know what caused it, but this is kind of very amenish for me, but fruitier and more like pure malt a little bit with its fruitiness, because it goes into that fruity direction. So I feel like this was very, very influenced by the Mugler fragrances, especially Angel, because this came a little before this. I think this is 1994, this is 1996, and then Angel for Women was 1992. Either way though, this is a great gourmand fragrance and smells great to this day, and it only costs about 20 bucks. It's a great smelling fragrance. It's with honey, pineapple, vanilla, tobacco, patchouli, amber, nutmeg, and lavender. Very, very long lasting, very, very fruity, very ambery, and I love the way it smells. And if you feel like you are a fan of something like this, or even something like pure malt or pure Havane or any of the Mugler fragrances, and you've never sampled Animal Animal, you should definitely try that. So that's Animal Animal at number 12. It still smells great today. And here, next fragrance, we're going to the house of Guerlain. This is Vetiver. Vetiver is here because, you know, all the other fragrances that are coming after this are a little better for me, but it's a great solid vetiver for an entry-level vetiver person. This has the leather note in here, but the leather note is not so prominent. But if you kind of like you know, pinpoint the leather note, you will smell that it's not the best smelling leather. The leather's gotten a little bad smelling. Not bad in really bad way, because it's not so prominent, but if you pick it out, you can smell that it's not the best leather. But everything else around here smells fantastic, and I still love this one. I love this fragrance because it means a lot to me. My dad wore it when I was young. I wore it when I was young. Vetiver, oak moss, tobacco, bergamot, black pepper, lemon, leather are the notes. But one of the most iconic fragrances for men, vetiver, and I love vetiver to begin with. So it's that kind of like earthy, damp smelling, grassy smelling green note that's vetiver. So this is vetiver from the house of Guerlain. That's at number 11. And then this one, this is so iconic for me. This is Fahrenheit from the house of Dior at number 10. It's definitely an ozonic violet leaf heavy fragrance with that kind of like petroleum note in here, but it's kind of like watered down a lot. It's very, very watered down. There's leather in here. The leather doesn't smell as bad as some of the other leather fragrances, but in the end, man, this was the fragrance that I first saw the bottle of, and I was like, totally drawn. I was like, I want that bottle. I love it so much. I love the fiery red color of it. When I was wearing it for the first times, like for the first years, it reminded me of Red Hots. There was something cinnamony hot running throughout it. I don't know if it was a subconscious thing because of the bottle, but it had a very, very fiery, hot experience. Currently, it's not what it used to be. It's watered completely down, but I think as a nostalgic thing, it's great to have because it still smells pretty good, just not as beefy as it once was, if that makes sense to you guys. Fahrenheit is great. I love it. It's at number 10. The Parfum is even better right now, and that is much more intense. Of course, it's the Parfum version, but it's a gourmand Parfum version. Okay guys, number 9, Guerlain Habit Rouge. We're going into the LVMH wing of the video, and obviously LVMH pays a lot more attention to creating better not flankers, but reformulations. And I feel like in general, Habit Rouge or Habit Rouge has been reformulated. It had a major reformulation in the 2000s, I believe, from what I read, and I mentioned in my video on Habit Rouge fragrances. But lemon, rose, vanilla, leather, carnation, sandalwood, benzoin, patchouli, rosewood. There's lots of orange and bergamot in here as well, and a little bit of ambery touch. The carnation is so prominent for me in here. I can totally smell it. Vanilla is also very, very prominent, and also the rose and the lemon. So it's a classy masculine fragrance, very, very in line with Guerlain fragrances, and it still smells great today. This is the Eau de Parfum version, which I like. The Eau de Toilette version is a little reversed with the concentration of the notes. There's a little more, a little less vanilla, a little more citruses in the Eau de Toilette version. This is the Parfum, yeah. But this is a great fragrance. I love it. It's classy, it's masculine, but sweet and very cozy as well. So that's Habit Rouge from the house of Guerlain. This one actually made it to the list, and I'm surprised it did, but I was going through all my classic men's fragrances, and it deserves to be here. You can still get this fragrance here and there. and if you like the idea of fig, you should definitely do. This is from Dior. It's a Dune pour Homme. I recently did a video about this fragrance. If you haven't caught that video, go catch it. I was comparing this to Dior's Balade Sauvage, which both are fig fragrances. If you like fig, fig leaf, fig fruit, sandalwood, cassis, Hedione, Clary sage, rose, cedar, tonka, basil, and the combination, it's a very, very sandy, beachy fig fragrance. It doesn't smell aquatic, but it can get the sandy beachiness in there, but it's almost like the sand with a fig tree next to you, and you're picking them and eating them on the sand. Does that make sense to you guys? It's very aromatic, it's very spicy, but also slightly fruity and green leafy. So that's Dune pour Homme. Check it out if you don't know it. I feel like that's a great fragrance. Next, going to the House of Chanel. These are the better fragrances now. They think they've kept these fragrances good. They've been reformulated, but they still smell great, even though they're not what the density or depth and intensity they were once, the potency. This is Chanel Egoiste. I love this fragrance, and I have found a recent new love for this fragrance because I feel like this reminds me of fragrances like Chanel number 18, Dior's what's it called? Santal Noir. Fragrances like that with ambrette and sandalwood together is what this fragrance is all about, and that's kind of why I like this fragrance. So this one's all about cinnamon, sandalwood, rose, tobacco, rosewood, vanilla. There's definitely an ambrette seed note in here, and I'm obsessed with this note, and with the fact that I love Santal Noir and Chanel number 18, and the fact that this reminds me of those two fragrances, I found a new love for this one. It's classy masculine fragrance featuring rose, but definitely lots of sandalwood and ambrette with some other notes as well. Egoiste is a great scent. Again, I have a comparison video of Egoiste with Platinum Egoiste on the channel. Go catch that if you are curious. Alrighty guys, this next one is number 6, and it's going to the House of Versace. And I don't really do a lot of Versace fragrance review videos because I don't really like their fragrances, but this one I still really enjoy, and I've put it at number 6. Even though it's much weaker than it once was, it still smells great. This is Dreamer from the House of Versace. Lavender, tobacco, tonka, clary sage, rose, carnation, balsam fir, geranium, vetiver. It's a tobacco fougere, aromatic fougere fragrance, and you know, it just smells great, and it takes me back to the days when I was wearing this in the late 90s. It is from the late 90s. I think 97 is when it came out, and I love that whole combination of the leafy, almost floral tobacco. It's very aromatic with the lavender and the fougere-like qualities. I just wish it was a little more depth. It had the depth and density that it once did, but if this is all we can get, and you can get lots of great deals on this one, it still smells great today. Again, this list is ranked in a way where how great the fragrances smell, so I basically ranked it that way. And that fragrance really does smell great. So this next fragrance, going back to the late 90s again, it's Cartier Declaration, created by Jean-Claude Elena. I feel like this fragrance is still smelling wonderful like it once was. Still a little lighter than it once was, but if you think it's a little light, you can always get the Parfum version, but the Declaration original Eau de Toilette came out in the late 90s. This one's known for cardamom, bitter orange, caraway seeds, black pepper, so it's very spicy, it's sexy, it's also masculine and very classy. It's a classy scent, dressy, kind of sophisticated smelling that never goes out of style. Anyway, Cartier Declaration, if you don't know it, check it out. I think to this day it still smells really fantastic. And at number 4, one of the earlier fragrances on this list, one of the earliest fragrances, this is Caron, pour un homme de Caron. So at number 4, how great does it smell? It smells of lavender, vanilla, and musk. Those are the only notes that are credited. And it's this very cozy, lavendery, comfortable fragrance that I think both men and women can pull off. This is definitely for the lavender lover. It's definitely for the vanilla lover and the musk lover. All of those notes are very cozy for me. And this is one of the coziest fragrances on this list. If you like them cozy, a great fragrance. It's also a great bed fragrance. When you go to bed, you wear some of this stuff. Maybe spray some on your pillow, you know, let it dry, and the smell is fantastic. Lavender definitely does make you fall asleep, and this one, I'm not saying it's going to make you fall asleep throughout the day, but it definitely will put you in that sleepy mode. Great fragrance. Caron, pour un homme de Caron. I still think it smells fantastic to this day with what formulation or reformulation that they have given for us. Back to the House of Chanel, it's Allure Homme, the original. The current formulation smells fantastic still, definitely lighter than it once was, but I really enjoy this combination of notes together with the vanilla and the tonka, the fruitiness of peach, the milkiness of the coconut, some lemons and things like that. What I like about this one is still a very, very popular Chanel fragrance. It's got its multiple flankers. I think there's 3 additional flankers, could be 4, but currently I think there's only 3. And the fact that it's still very, very classy, but it's also playful at the same time. Vanilla and tonka and coconut and lemons together give you a great combination of smells. I love it. And the tonka beans have a slight tobacco-ish undertone in there. Along with the vanilla, I think it's a great combo. The fact that it's very popular, I think that's why they have those flankers, and the flankers focus on some of the notes and kind of highlight them in the fragrance. But this one came out in the late 90s, and I think it still smells fantastic today. So Chanel Uller Homme is number 3. All right, this one is going to the house of Guerlain. It's Heritage, and remember, as I said, it's a little similar to this to me. Not identical, but in the end, this one has been kept smelling great today. This one has a little flaws to it in the smell. That's why this one's ranked lower, this one's higher. Heritage is fantastic fragrance. It's one of my favorite fragrances that are classic, and especially from Guerlain. Heritage is all about sandalwood, lavender, and patchouli. Coriander comes in, also amber, geranium, and juniper. So it's kind of like a barbershop-y, classy, masculine fragrance that's going into the woody direction. So it doesn't really stop at barbershop, it goes a little further. I think the trail with this one is also great. I've featured it in a Sexiest Trail Fragrances video recently. If you haven't caught that, definitely do. Such a great sexy trail. It's the patchouli, sandalwood, and lavender combo together. It's great, and that's why it's at number 2. It still smells great today, and I absolutely love this fragrance. It's one of my favorite men's fragrances from yesteryear. This is 30 plus years old. Anyway, Heritage from the house of Guerlain. It could be exactly 30 years. I think it came out in 1990. Last but not least, the best smelling fragrance out of everything today. It smells so good. But you know what? I have to be honest. This got a major redo, I believe, sometime in the 2000s. So I think it's not exactly the same formulation, but it's been around since like 1960s, 66, I believe, somewhere around there, 63, 66. But you know, this is a classic fragrance, and I think what they've given us currently smells fantastic. It's all about citruses, lots of lemons, bergamot, vetiver, oakmoss, basil, and rosemary. It's very aromatic, it's very herbal, and it's very, very citrusy, and the combination is very, very classic. It doesn't really stop at barbershop because I don't think it's really that style, but I think there are notes in here that might remind you of that kind of a style. It's just lots of citruses and very fresh and refreshing. It's an easygoing fragrance, and also it's a crowd pleaser, and I think it's never going to go out of style with me, and I think it's personally a very, very historic fragrance, and I hope they never discontinue this one because this smells fantastic. I know I've heard complaints from younger noses that it smells tired, it smells old, but you know, wear it a couple of times, maybe 3-4 times, maybe 5-6 times, and you'll see how great it is. Anyway, at number 1, it's Eau Sauvage, and that is my list. I know it's a longer video today, guys. Let me know what you think about these fragrances, and how would you put this list together, and what other fragrances that you have that are classic men's fragrances, and how would you rank them? I'd like to find out, and check into some missing fragrances that I might have smelled in the old days but not today. Also, let me know, do you have any of these fragrances, and what are your favorites from the list? Put a comment down so I can find out. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please do list below. Otherwise, please like this video, please share it, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.